Today I'm going to be teaching you how you can take a garment you own and, without destroying said garment, trace its sewing pattern so that you can have a sewing pattern. Items you're going to need for this. You're going to need a garment that you want to trace, some paper to trace it on. For the paper, you're going to want to use wrapping paper because it is just as good as professional tracing paper that you can get from sewing shops, and it is so much cheaper to get. Also, a lot of wrapping paper has like a centimeter grid on the back, which you can use if you're doing pattern drafting more complicated than what we're going to be doing today, which is very useful. You're going to need a piece that's big enough to fit all of your pattern pieces on. If you do not have a piece that is big enough, you can always tape smaller pieces together. That's what I do with my scraps whenever I run out of wrapping paper, like I did this time. And then voila, our shorts fit onto the wrapping paper now. Incredible. Wow. If you need to do that, you're also going to need tape. You're going to need a pen or a pencil of some variety, maybe a marker to mark on your paper. You're going to need a ruler, ideally a measuring tape, some scissors to cut out your pattern at the end, and pins, lots of pins. So let's get started, shall we? Obviously today's instructions are going to be for shorts specifically, but you can do this with any garment that you want. Details are going to vary, but for shorts or pants. First thing you're going to do is you're going to take your side seam and you're going to fold it over and pin it so that where the seam is also the end of where your fabric's going to be if we lay this flat, because we basically just want to be able to trace along it and get the correct shape. You are going to lay your garment as flat as humanly possible. So there's no folds in it, no bunching of the underneath layer that would bulk out the top layer and malform it or anything. If you're working with stretch fabric like these shorts, you also want to make sure that you're not stretching the fabric out. You just want it to kind of lay relaxed, and you straighten it out so that you get the correct shape of what the fabric without the stretch does. Next, you're going to draw a straight line on your paper. You're going to locate a seam that is straight to align with it. In this case, the side seam was straight, so that was very easy, but sometimes the side seam is not straight, so you're going to want to find whatever the straightest seam is that you have and somehow position it against the straight line so that you can kind of use it as a guide for where your pattern piece goes. Then we're going to mark the top, the waistband, the bottom. We're going to trace along the bottom, and for the inseam, because basically on pants, generally the back piece is bigger than the front piece. If you just lay it flat, the inseam is going to kind of lay on the front. So we're going to kind of have to flip it up and trace along it by feeling where it is and kind of checking over and over again where it is to get it right. You're going to make sure that it stays laying flat as you trace, and you're going to do the same thing for the waistband and for the center seam. You only need to trace this once because each piece should be symmetrical on both sides. So basically, if you've traced the right side or the left side, you don't need to trace the respective other one. You just need to trace the front and the back. We're going to try and make sure that the point where all of the pieces are going to meet at the crotch, that we get that point right. It should usually be around a right angle, so 90-degree angle. We're going to connect our lines. It should just be made up out of straight lines and curves. So you want to make sure that kind of if there's a little wobble or something, just make sure that you smooth that out a little bit and make sure that you get your points right and your lines nice. I then measured just to make sure that it matched my garment, just to make sure that it's close enough. We're not going for 100% accuracy. This is just to kind of have a rough pattern to get started on. I also traced in the grain line. If you are a beginner, do not worry about this. You don't need to know about that yet. We can cover that in another video someday. I then went around the whole thing, traced it all with marker, and then we're going to do the back next. So for the back, we also want to pin the inseam where it was folded earlier already so that it's straight. But again, the back piece is going to be bigger than the front, so part of the back piece is currently now folded onto the front and pinned there. We want to trace around that before we add back in the piece that was folded over. If you need more paper to fit your garment, add more paper with your tape. Rinse and repeat. We align the side seam with a straight line. We mark our seams and our outlines. And I just trace along the inseam, fold for now. And then we're gonna bother with, once again, the center seam and the point. We're gonna connect all of our lines nice and clean. And then we can turn the whole piece around and add the last bit of the inseam onto the line from where we drew along the fold, just to kind of add that last bit that we missed. I then finished everything marker. I measured. It didn't line up for some reason, so I added a centimeter at the top because it seemed to be a centimeter too short, and then I measured it again later because other bits didn't match up. But then it was originally the correct one apparently, so I got rid of my new line again and remarked the previous ones. But okay. Sure. To trace the back pocket, I added a line of pins just above the pocket along my ruler to make sure that it's like a line I can trace onto my pattern. Basically a line just a bit closer to the actual pocket so that it's easier to measure from the line to the pocket than it would be from like the waistline. And we're basically going to go through and measure from the side seams and from that line to get the points of the pocket. And because this pocket is not a perfect rectangle, I went back in and kind of rounded it out a little bit. Then at the end we remove all of our pins. I measured the side pockets and marked those, even though I'm gonna alter those when I change this pattern up later because I don't like that style of pocket, but we're gonna trace them for now. I also measured the eyelet distance and the waistband. And then finally we're gonna cut out our pieces along the correct lines that we have marked correctly. Yes. And then we have a pattern. And so that's how you can take a garment you own and make a pattern out of it. I'm not going to stick to this pattern because I want to alter it. And so that's what we're going to be doing in another video. I will see you then.